My thanks to the organizing committee for letting me speak here this morning. And here are all the credits. And I'll talk a little bit about conventional wisdom of computing genomic EBV. Number one, the accuracy of genomic EBV computed with subsets of markers is almost always not more accurate than the accuracy of GBV computed from the analysis of all the markers. And two, the accuracy of genomic EBV for young bulls, computed analysis of less than 1,000 bulls, is generally no higher than parent averages. So these are the conventional wisdoms. And Bayesian shrinkage of marker effects prove accuracy of GBV best marginally. So let's see where this takes us. I'm going to a paper that's going to be coming out in the special edition of Animal Genetics in honor of Professor Morris Solar. And one thing we found here, for genomic selection, monitoring the allelic frequencies in a subset of younger individuals may be more useful than monitoring allelic frequencies in the total population, which is generally done. And what we found was that out of the 15,000 haplotypes with population frequencies between 5 and 95%, 930 haplotypes underwent significant changes in allele frequencies, either going below 10% or above 10% for the young bulls. So how have people suggested to select markers? Either random or equally spaced throughout the genome, or markers with the greatest effects, or selection of markers recently based on principal component analysis. And now I'm going to talk a minute about our data set, all valid records since 1985, and what we did, what everybody else did, divide into a training set and a validation set. They looked at 8 traits. And the EBV were computed by a multi-trait animal model. We also have female fertility and single-trait animal model for herd life. And we also looked at called modified DYD, which are a little bit different than regular DYD. And effects on the genotype. So we had 1,359 bulls. And we deleted SNPs from analysis, generally what everybody else did, less than 5%. Did not appear on the original B chip, were valid for at least half of the animals, and so on. And after edits, we're left with 39,800 SNPs, which is pretty much what everybody gets from the medium density bovine chip. And here is the distribution of bulls that we had by birth date from 1975 through 2010, 11. And these are the number of bulls we had in the training set and the validation set, about 800 or so in the training and 140 in the validation. And we use the method of Paul van Reyden, and then regression coefficients for the sum of marker effects, parent average, and birth year were then computed from the training set using all bulls with genotypes, modified DYD, and EBV for dams based on at least one daughter record. The regression coefficients derived from the training set were then used to compute GBV for the young bulls. And GBV were computed only for young bulls with genotypes and dam EBV based on at least one valid daughter. And the GBV of the young bulls were compared to their November 2011 EBV, computed from the complete data set with, of course, daughter records. So the first thing we did was look at what happens if we use all the SNPs and evenly spaced SNPs. And correlations of the GBV of the validation bulls of the current EBV were compared to the correlations of their parent average with their EBV. And since parent average has a major effect on EBV of low heritability traits, even with greater than 50 daughters, correlations for GBV and PA were also computed. And here you have the correlations, and so far nothing very surprising. If you look at protein, parent average is slightly better than GEBV. The same thing with DYD. And if you look at fertility, the GEBV is a little bit better than the parent average, but and also for GEBV. Both if we look at using all SNPs or looking only the 1,991 SNPs, in other words, each 20th SNP. And really no difference between the situation of using all SNPs or each 20th SNP. So, as I said, with 2,000 evenly spaced SNPs, correlations of GBV with current EBV were lower than PA for both traits, parent average. Now, method 1, selection of markers. So SNPs are first selected for each trait based on a linear model analysis for each trait, and then a subset of these SNPs is analyzed by a REML model, including relationships. In both SNPs, each SNP is analyzed separately, which is not what's generally done. A number of SNPs included in the analysis was varied over the range of 400 to 6,000. And here you can see that for every trait we looked at, we received an optimum as far as a correlation, which is, first of all, a little bit surprising. You would think that what's generally known, the more SNPs you had, the correlation should go higher. And that is not what happened for all the traits. And here, if you look at the optimum situation, you can see that with each of the traits analyzed, here I'll go down to the bottom, we have for the PD11, which is our index, you have with parent average, you have a correlation of 0.37, and with GEBV, you have a correlation of 0.64, almost double. If you look at the modified DYD, you have a correlation of parent average of 28, and for GEBV of 58. If you look at protein, you get also an increase of 20%, and so on. Better for all the traits. And I gave you the correlations on that already. All correlations are lower for herd life. Okay, this is not the main thing I want to talk about. But here's the catch. What did I do that is not legal? In this method 1, SNPs were selected based on their current EBV, not EBV from the training set. In other words, I selected the SNPs on their evaluations in 2011, not on what they do currently. So let's go back. We then selected SNPs by the same procedure, but based on their 2008 EBV, 3 years ago, which is the data that we should have had if we were doing this all analysis 3 years ago. And what happens then? And then the results go way down. You can see now that although for some of the traits, for fat, for instance, GEBV is still better, for protein it's not better, and for the index, it's also not better. Let's go back again. Same situation pretty much for DYD. When you select them based on the evaluations you had in real time, which would have been 3 years ago, no advantage. And here I give you the correlations. Okay, what's the difference? In the analysis of the validation set, the effect of PA was highly correlated with the sum of the SNP effects. Thus, both GEBV and parent averages detected the same QTL. However, other QTLs are segregating in the young bulls. In order to improve GEBV, it is necessary to include markers linked to QTL that are not segregating in the training set. So this brought us, to method 3. First, the SNPs with the greatest effects on the training set EBV, as determined by REML analysis, were deleted. Of the remaining SNPs, the markers with the greatest effects on the 2011 EBV were retained. The number of SNPs deleted based on the 2008 EBV and retained based on the 2011 EBV were varied to obtain a maximum correlation. And lo and behold, this is pretty impressive. If you do this, in other words, remove those SNPs that had big effects in 2008, retain those that had big effects only in 2011, you get even an improvement over method 1. For protein, for instance, a difference of 45%. For herd life, for PD11, our index, you're more than double. So, as far as the optimum number of markers, it varied from 1,000 to 1,700. In nearly all cases, the correlations of the GEBV with EBV and MDYD were higher with method 3 than method 1. And the mean difference in the correlations in GEBV parent average was 26%. But this method also used information not available in 2008. So now we come to method 4. And in this case, what I'm suggesting here, the SNPs with the greatest effects on the training set EBV, again 2008, as determined by the REML analysis, were deleted. Of the remaining SNPs, the markers with the greatest change in allele frequency between the bulls in the training set and the validation set were retained. We retained those markers that the alleles changed frequency under the assumption that these were under selection. The number of SNPs deleted and retained were again varied. And here I show a key. And here we get the following results, that for all the traits analyzed, we did get an improvement of GEBV over parent average, except for milk, which had the highest correlation. And if you look at the index, we go from 37% to 41%. Non-impressive, but we still did get an advantage for all but one trait, both for EBV and for DYD. And the optimum number of markers deleted ranged from 200 to 8,000 for persistency. The optimum markers included ranged from 800 to 9,000. For all traits except milk, the correlation of GEBV and EBV and DYD were higher than the correlations of parent average with the current EBV and DYD. The mean difference in the correlation between GEBV and parent average was 4.2%, which is not fantastic, but shows you that you can do something. And this method did not use information not available in June 2008. We used the allelic frequencies, but the allelic frequencies of the young bulls would have been available in 2008. Their genotypes, their genetic evaluations were not. So let's see how this does as far as bias. And here we have the regressions on coefficients of PA and method for GEB on EBV. And we see that both PA and GEBV are pretty much unbiased. What we would want is regressions close to 1, and most of the regressions are pretty close to 1. Not much difference here between parent average and GEBV. And as far as means of the traits, we can see that for all of the traits, the GEBV are closer to the EBV, which is the current EBV, for all the traits, just about all the traits. An exception would be herd life. But if we look again at the index, look at the index, we can see that we're pretty much unbiased. Mean for GEBV is 377, mean for EBV is 370. Standard deviations are pretty much as expected. Of course, they're less for the GEBV and PA than for EBV. And conclusions. Both parent average and GEBV regressions are close to unity. With respect to means, GEBV are less biased. GEBV were nearly unbiased for the index, while the means of PA was nearly 100 units higher than the current EBV. Coefficients of determination for GEBV were higher than parent average for all traits except milk production. And GEBV, derived from selected sets of markers, can outperform GEBV derived from analysis of all markers. Now this, of course, is only on a small data set. I don't know how this would perform on a much larger data set. GEBV derived from selected sets of markers can yield GEBV that outperform parent average, even if the training population includes less than 1,000 bulls. And so much for conventional wisdom. Thank you.